Welcome to the Refuge podcast, where we cultivate our faith in the shelter of God's word. I'm your host, Jennifer Elwood. And this is my friend, Alaena Stahl.
Hi.
And we are actually in her cafe, which is on the side of our church. And she invited me into this space when we connected in just like this really interesting way that I just feel like I have to share with you all. Was it the beginning of the summer?
I don't know.
End of spring. It was a couple months back at least. And at the end of church, we often have a really beautiful prayer time. And our pastor, Dusty, like literally points at me and goes, there's this spotlight on you, whatever it is that you're wrestling with, whatever it is that you're considering, God's in it. And I was considering literally that morning taking the podcast and shifting in a different direction and doing these deep dive episodes. And he told me God was in it. And I really felt like that was true. And I literally thought, I wonder if Alaena would record an episode with me, literally all in that space. And then Dusty says, "Hey, Alaena, go pray for her." And she came down and prayed for me. And I said, "I think I'm supposed to ask you to do this with me." And she was like, "Okay." And here we are months later. And we have studied, yes. And we have studied Psalm 45:1, which I talked about last week with the Lady Litz group, which is, "My heart is stirred by a noble theme as I recite my verses for the King. My tongue is the pen of a skillful writer." And that's the New Living Translation. And here's another one that I really liked. "My heart overflows with a good theme. I address my psalm to the King. My tongue is like the pen of a skillful writer." And then that's the Amplified. And then last Sunday, Alaena approached me at church and was like, "Have you read it in the Message?" And I was like, "I don't think I read it in the Message." So I looked it up. And why don't you read the first verse?
Yeah, it's "My heart bursts its banks, spilling beauty and goodness. I pour it out in a poem to the King, shaping the river into words."
Yeah, the river into words is it is so beautiful. And so just taking my initial thoughts of this verse and reading it in multiple different translations. I love, first of all, that this is written from a woman's perspective.
Yeah.
Which I think is really amazing. I think we so often don't get that in the Bible. And this is an example of that, which I think is really beautiful.
Absolutely.
And actually kind of reading through the whole thing, and we'll read the entire Psalm 45 at the end, but it reminds me a little bit of a Song of Songs. Just like that beautiful love imagery and poetry.
Sure.
And, I can imagine it being sung at a wedding, and thoughts of a new bride, and stirred towards poetic thoughts and words as she approaches her wedding. And this song is about a woman marrying the King. And so my initial thoughts were this kind of reminds me of the bride of Christ approaching, the church is approaching King Jesus. And so anyway, what were your first thoughts about this verse?
Well, the first verse, I think it's just setting us up for what she's about to delve into. And that's what she's doing. Her heart is stirred and she begins to pour out and lavish her heart. And I think what a beautiful example it is for us to be able to pour our hearts out. A lot of times we think we have to be polished or, as much as this is gorgeous, just letting the words of our heart pour out rather than, even getting ready for today. I've never been featured on a podcast, so this was a thing. I'm reading through all the commentary and things, and I was feeling really anxious, and that's why I approached you on Sunday. It was I don't feel like this is what I read when I read the verse, but I was feeling this is what I was expected of, so that's why I pulled you aside.
Oh, yeah. And I'm like, that's what the Holy Spirit talked to with someone else.
Yeah.
And they shared it.
Yeah.
But that is not always what we then have to share, or really what resonates with us. Once you said that to me, I went through I don't know how much. Like
There was a lot. There's
Just
a lot of
commentary.
commentary. And I was like, this isn't resonating as it did. Obviously, it's all great and like good observations and but for me it stirred my heart in a different way.
Absolutely.
And obviously the Lord had this set up for, me to, check with you.
Yes, and do and just to kind of take this in a different direction
Yeah.
than the oh holy commentators of the 18th 19th centuries
Sure. Oh,
that I
holy.
tend to like resonate with somewhat sometimes,
Sure, yeah.
but yeah, so I thought we could just like take a look at a couple of the words in their original languages before we kind of move on into, I know that like this really touched with you
Yeah.
in a lot of ways, and just like so at any rate, so this word overflowing or stirred is in Hebrew, that's the word rahash, and it also means to keep moving, where that like river comes from, right? To gush, and like a huge outpouring of the heart, which I thought was so beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then I just want to just talk about one more word, which is the word ready at the end, which means quick, prompt, ready, and skilled in Hebrew. But so that my archaeology study Bible pointed out that this word makir in Egyptian actually means scribe.
Wow.
Which I thought was really interesting. Like, I guess all those amazing, quadlingual people of, the ancient world would have maybe picked up on this.
Yeah.
Had they known very much Egyptian.
Yeah.
And they probably did. So I just thought that was a really, interesting point, and a really interesting use of words in that.
Very skillful.
Yes, extremely skillful. I'm like, when you see like this deeper, it's like,
yeah,
that's so amazing. Yeah. So I would love for you to just kind of share your heart where you have received this verse.
Yeah.
And kind of, I know you have a poem to share.
Yeah.
And so
well, I mean, let's read the message part again,
yes.
because it's so beautiful. And my heart bursts its banks, filling beauty and goodness. I pour it out in a poem to the king, shaping the river into words. And so for me, when you presented this verse, I was like, oh wow, well, I know a little bit about writing. So writing's been for me my only outlet. I grew up in a really chaotic home. And I was the strong, stable one in my home. I was inversion parenting and all that. And writing was my outlet. It's where I had space to have feelings and have moments of breaking, because otherwise I had to be strong. And so writing from a young age has been something where I would just journal and pour out my heart to Jesus, or later it became writing and writing songs, I mean. And so throughout my life, writing has just been a big instrument. And I think so much we try and pour out our hearts, and we in this, when I first read the first one, it was like all about beauty, and I recite my verses to my king, like my heart is stirred. And so for me, I heard, oh, this sounds all beautiful, and a lot of times my heart is not poured out beautifully. Like there's always anguish, and even throughout the Psalms, David's contemplating suicide, and like there's so many hard things.
There's a lot of hard. Like this is one of those few Psalms that actually like are just beautiful outflow, like this.
And there's not this anguish underneath. Yes.
No, the lamentation.
Yes.
Not that that's bad at all, because it's really a beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually, like in my book, that's like one of the days is like the gift of lamentation.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I remember people looking at that and going, what? But really it is. Mm-hmm. And it's beautiful that our King Jesus wants to hear our river of words, and our the good and the bad and
Yeah.
all of it.
Well, and I see the gift of writing too, like how much pouring out my heart has released a pressure or a weight from my shoulders, or sometimes we have a difficult time verbalizing things. And if you sit down with a pen, it can pour out. And so I think writing is more than just you know, whatever it might be to somebody, you know, just to write a prayer or whatever. But like if we can just like actually sit and connect, lament or like joy or whatever it might be, like the Lord longs to hear all of it. Like my heart bursts its banks. It doesn't mean, that doesn't always mean joy. Like it bursts its banks. And as I pour it out in a poem to the King, shaping the river into words. And you know, a river is not all smooth and beautiful. You know, there's, you know, crooked edges and sharp places and giant rocks that you can smash into, you know, and but like the beauty of it is that we pour our heart out no matter what form. And so I also love Marcus Mumford is a famous musician. He's Mumford and Sons, but he just wrote a
I saw them open for you too a few years ago.
I
They were so good.
I saw them in Portland several years ago. And then Marcus Mumford I saw this summer actually. So I went to the show at the Gorge Amphitheater, and but he just wrote an album, and it's very intense. It's a self-titled album, and it's just him. But he wrote about his abuse as a child, about his abuser, and it's like it's kind of hard. It was hard to listen to. I remember I was on a run and just listening to the words, and I had to stop a couple times with tears in my eyes. Because my brother was molested by his father, and my brother also subsequently passed away of a drug overdose in 2015. And so I know what holding on to that anguish does. You know, you can treat it with, you know, drugs and alcohol, whatever it might be. And I remember standing there on my run and stopping and crying and being like, gosh, what if my brother could have poured his heart out to the King and let go of some of that? And so just the beauty that writing is, and it's not all pretty. Like this album is hard to listen to, but what a tool of therapy that is for people. And then the honest work impacts people like me. I'm just on my run, and then all of a sudden I'm crying, you know?
Right.
So yeah, this is how this verse really struck me, was just how the Lord wants to hear it. He doesn't want it polished. He wants it to burst its banks, and he wants it to pour it out. And he sees that lamenting, he sees that anguish as beauty, because we're giving it to him. It's a gift to him, whether it's joy and praise or whether it's lament and anguish. And so I do have a poem that I wrote after. So backstory, I moved to Yakima in 2016, just a month after my mom passed away, and I had a 2-month-old daughter. And so I was going through postpartum depression and grieving, and I could never really sort it out. But the Lord put me here in the middle of the desert and with nowhere to go. Like he forced me to sit, because in Portland I would have just stayed busy. I would have just kept going and ignored the things. But he strategically positioned me here. In I think this was the longest winter we ever had. We had piled high snow through like April. I swear it was so awful. And so this one just kind of came out of a pouring as I grieved. So I'm just gonna read it. As the winter lingers and time stands still, I begin to wonder if spring will ever appear. This season's been dark, heavy, full of sorrow. But the snows brought a peace that I grasped for tomorrow. In the stillness I wept, allowed the ache to invade, knowing no longer could I keep it at bay. The snow is now melting, and here comes the flood. I'm drowning in anguish. When will this all be done? The fog settles and hinders my sight, but I'm still standing and I won't give up this fight. Then there's a light, a fresh breeze is blowing. You pull me up and help me keep going. Spring is nearing, flowers in bloom. Life as normal seems to resume. The pain isn't over. It catches me by surprise. But your faithfulness is steady and your goodness in sight. So I press onward and walk in your truth, because without fail, you make all things new. So that was just an outpouring of just, a little something of the process, the progress. Like there were times where I felt like I was gonna drown, and there were times that I felt like I couldn't get up, but there's always those moments where the Lord is like, no, wait, you can do this. There's a fresh breeze. And this was the first, the picture I took was the first flower of spring. So
It's beautiful.
yeah. So I love this verse, and I'm really grateful that this is the one that you had picked up for us to walk through.
Me too. Yeah, this verse is really special to the group that I, interviewed for last week's episode. And, unfortunately, and I talked about this in the previous episode, Nancy Ness, who was a person that asked me if I would have their group on, and was the one that gave me this verse. And I've read it before, but it hadn't resonated with me in the way that it does now, obviously.
Yeah.
And so I recorded with Nancy and her group, and it was 2 weeks to the day that I found out that she had unexpectedly passed away. And I just went to her funeral last Saturday. And it was kind of amazing. She was adopted, but then she also has all this biological family, and it was amazing sitting in a room full of like several people that looked like her. And it was just really amazing. Like, this woman was a gatherer of people.
Yeah.
And so when she was passionate about something, she gathered. And one of the last things that she gathered were writers. And I love that there is an entire group of people out there that are focused on this verse.
Yeah.
In everything that they're writing, whether it's fiction, nonfiction, poetry, memoir, it doesn't matter.
Wow.
The whole point is that whatever they're writing is done with the Father, and done with, this shaping of river into words.
Yeah. I love that phrase.
I do too. So I think this is a great part to, I'm going to step back for 2 seconds. I'm going to tell you really quickly the picture that I was given when I read this. I read the whole psalm to my daughter the night that I found out about my friend. And I just had this beautiful picture of like bride Nancy with this like elaborate bouquet of flowers. And I learned actually when I went to the funeral, like, she enjoyed painting them. Like, they had a gorgeous like painting that she had done of flowers.
Wow.
And so just saw like the back of her in a white dress with like flowers like outpouring beyond her silhouette, approaching King Jesus and the gates of heaven, and just like this bright sunshine and light. And
wow.
So I will never, ever think of this verse in the same way, never again. And it'll change probably over time, and probably even into eternity.
Yeah.
When, for ourselves, we get to experience Psalm 45, like, for reals.
Yeah, absolutely. For reals.
So, can you close us by reading the entire psalm out of the Message paraphrase?
Yeah, for sure. My heart bursts with thanks, spilling beauty and goodness. I pour it out in a poem to the King, shaping the river into words. You're the handsomest of men. Every word from your lips is sheer grace. And God has blessed you so much. Strap your sword to your side, warrior. Accept praise, accept due honor. Ride majestically, ride triumphantly. Ride on the side of truth. Ride for the righteous meek. Your instructions are glow in the dark. You shoot sharp arrows into enemies' hearts. The king's foes lie down in the dust beaten. Your throne is God's throne, ever and always. The scepter of your royal rule measures right living. You love the right and hate the wrong. And that is why God, your very own God, poured fragrant oil on your head, marking you out as king from among your dear companions. Your forest-drenched garments are fragrant with mountain breeze. Chamber music from the throne room makes you want to dance. King's daughters are maids in your court, the bride glittering with golden jewelry. Now listen, daughter, don't miss a word. Forget your country, put your home behind you. Be here. The king is wild for you. Since he's your lord, adore him. Wedding gifts pour in from Tyre. That's a rich guests shower you with presents. Her wedding dress is dazzling, lined with gold by the weavers. All her dresses and robes are woven with gold. She is led to the king, followed by her virgin companions. A procession of joy and laughter, a grand entrance to the king's special palace. Set your mind now on sons. Don't dote on father and grandfather. You'll set your sons up as princes all over the earth. I'll make you famous for generations. You'll be the talk of the town for a long, long time.
Ugh.
So beautiful.
So beautiful.
I love what was it?
I know there's so much in this whole thing.
Yeah.
There's so much. A procession of joy and laughter.
Procession of joy and laughter. The king is wild for you.
The king is
wild here. The king is wild for you. Wow. Yeah. If that's not a love song, I don't know.
I don't know what is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, oh, I got like the people. I hear people from the South call it glory pimples.
Glory
pimples. It's like, ooh,
yeah.
a little bit of a shiver. Like, so good.
Yeah. Well, and just the contrast and the beauty of the vision you had, like, what a gift, like, from the Lord, and to be able to give that to her family.
Yes.
And be able to share that. Wow. Now I have glory.
Oh, yes. Well, thank you so much
for having me.
Yeah, I absolutely enjoyed this, and I hope all of you did too. You've been listening to the Refuge podcast, where we cultivate our faith in the shelter of God's word.